strap in and get ready for After Hours with TC Restani. This is Abigail Harwich, executive producer, welcoming you to the show. And now, TC Restani!
Alrighty, welcome to this monstrous episode of the After Hours of TC Restani, the podcast. I am TC Restani, emanating from the palatial podcast penthouse, and I got the masters of Toku here today. I got Dave and I got Brian, the hosts of one of the greatest podcasts about Godzilla and all his kaiju friends, Talking Toku. What's going on, guys?
That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said about our podcast before.
Entirely untrue.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that much. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, welcome, guys. You know, I've been a fan of your work now for a bunch of years now. You've been doing Talking Toku for what, maybe 2.5 years, something like that?
I think we're a little over 2.5 years.
A little over 2.5 years. Now, for those who are listening out there have no idea what Toku is. You know, people maybe say, did he say tofu? No, it's Toku. Give us the 411 on what actually Talking Toku is.
So, Talking Toku, the term Toku is short for tokusatsu, which is the Japanese word for special filming. That's what it literally translates to, but it essentially boils down to special effects filmmaking. Basically, any practical effect you would see in any movie, that's what that is, just through the Japanese lens, specifically the Japanese filmmaking.
Unbelievable. Now, you guys are in your mid-20s, right?
Unfortunately.
Oh, well, not unfortunately, but I remember going back in time. I was born in 1971, all right? And the only exposure I had to Toku films was a little TV show called Creature Double Feature, which aired here in the Boston area on WLVI TV 56 every Saturday from noon till 4. Now, they had B movies and crappy horror movies, but they had the crown jewel, of course, was the kaiju movies. Now, kaiju means monster in Japanese, right?
Correct.
And I loved all those Godzillas and Gamera movies and whatnot. But it seemed to like dissipate, you know, once the 80s creeped in, and then maybe in the 90s had a little resurgence with the Matthew Broderick movie that came out in 1998. You guys weren't around then. So how did you get into, you know, kaiju?
Brian, you want to tackle this first?
Blockbuster Video.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, I mean, Dave's like the same way. I grew up loving dinosaurs.
Okay.
So, like, I was obsessed with them. And like, you know, like the Jurassic Park movies and all that. And then like going to Blockbuster with my dad, he's like, you get to pick a movie and like, we'll watch it. He's going to fall asleep, but well, you know, and then I found like the Godzilla movies, which not a whole lot of them. And they were like the English dubs. And I forget what the first one I ever watched was at this point, but like,
at least it wasn't like the animated film, The Land Before Time or something like that.
I actually love The Land Before Time.
Okay, well, I stand corrected then.
No,
respect the name of A Land Before Time in this house, TC.
We do. Yeah, but that's how I found it, like just through like Blockbuster.
Now, were you confused when you're watching it saying, how come the voices don't sync up?
I don't know. I don't remember even thinking twice about it.
We love the dubs. They're kind of a guilty pleasure for some, you know, a not guilty pleasure for others. But we that's what we grew up on. That's what a lot of fans our age grew up on.
I mean, for the most part, it's all we had access to.
Exactly. Up until very, very recently, I think 2004 is when they started porting over the original Japanese audio tracks. So still fairly recent development for people to have access to the original versions. So a lot of people our ages only had access to those dubs. So, you know, regardless of what level of enjoyment they have on it, whether it be, you know, ironic or unironic, they have a special place in people's hearts, especially ours.
They're fantastic. And now, back you were saying when you went to Blockbuster, they must have had a very limited selection of movies at that time.
Yeah, it was never that many, and it was usually like the Heisei movies.
And that was kind of like the birth of the internet. It was before YouTube and whatnot. So how did you guys get more information? How did you guys become experts?
Well, a lot of fan sites because of the birth of the internet. There were a lot of fan sites. One of which was my favorite, Barry's Temple of Godzilla.
Really?
Which I believe Barry himself is somewhat local. He's from the Massachusetts, Boston area. I don't know if that's still the case, but Barry himself, I knew that for a fact. Kaiju Headquarters was another one I was a big fan of. Toho Kingdom, which is still active today. Those were a lot of good databases.
Now, were all these guys like my age or your age?
They were...
Or in between?
They were probably in between. They were, at that point, people running those sites were probably our age, like what we are now, like mid-20s
Gotcha.
or early 30s.
And is it a big community?
It's definitely getting bigger. It's small, but it's niche, I would say.
I'd say it's definitely still on the smaller side, but it's in comparison to what it had been before. It's pretty big now.
Yeah, it's not a Star Trek. It's not a Star Wars. I don't think it ever will be.
No.
But that's kind of cool in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, people, I knew people who are Star Wars fans that have never even seen all of the Star Wars movies. I'm a Star Wars fan. No, you're not. But you guys are like deep in this. You have like it's like people who collect, different cuts of songs on albums and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have DVDs from all over the world for this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And let's get down to brass tacks. Who's your favorite kaiju?
Are we really going to have the same exact answer again, Brian?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I know who mine is.
Well, let's hear yours, TC.
Gamera.
Gamera. Okay, that's a good choice.
Love Gamera.
That's based.
Everybody. See, the Godzilla movies, he really didn't show up until like near the end, right? He would destroy something, then go away, and then come back at the end for the big finish. Gamera seemed like he was in the movie a lot longer, and he was cooler.
Yeah, Gamera, especially right from the beginning, I think it was still a little serious in the first couple, but once Gamera versus Gauss came out in 1967, I want to say, is when it started kind of moving towards, a younger audience. And at the time, the kids, they went for the monsters.
Of course.
Because that's how we all got into it. So they started featuring him more and more in those films. But then in the 1990s, with the Shusuke Kaneko trilogy, it struck a really good balance between having it kind of more kid-friendly, but also featuring a more mature story. The franchise matured with its audience almost.
Gotcha. Now, which is that famous meme that I always see of Gamera doing it looks like he's in the Olympics doing that little twirly twirl thing on his mouth.
Yes, that is from Gamera versus Giron, which, Brian, I believe you just watched recently for the first time.
I did. I didn't like it.
What about that scene? He looked like he won the gold medal in the in gymnastics in the Olympics doing that thing.
It really did. He did a lot of goofy stuff in that.
Now growing up as a kid, was Gamera always a good guy? Was he a bad guy at one point in time?
He started off as a bad guy in the very first film. It was the usual 50s 60s B monster movie where he's awakened by atomic testing.
Of course.
And pretty much after that first film, he was more or less a hero after that. But he was still kind of on the fence in the sequel. But again, once Gamera vs. Gauss came out, it kind of...
You really can't be mad at a turtle.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, Rocky had Cuff and Link, right?
Exactly.
So you got to get Gamera, and you got to fly in space.
You got the Ninja Turtles, which obviously didn't come up until way later. I think the 1980s?
Late 80s, early 90s, something like that.
But everyone likes turtles.
Yeah, and Gamera was my favorite. He had those gimmick teeth and whatnot, the tusks and whatnot. And now merchandising. I know you guys have a lot of cool collectibles in your personal collection. Is Gamera part of one of them?
Do I have any Gamera stuff?
It's easy for me. I have no cameras.
No cameras.
I'm really bad at collecting stuff. So
okay, no,
Dave's
I do.
The collector.
I did buy recently a Bandai Hyper Gauss from Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris.
Of course, it's everybody's favorite out there. In fact, I actually had to go out and get you some of these things one time. Remember, was at that Comic-Con?
You did.
What did I get? You said I sent you a picture and just like all of it.
Yeah, all of them. I believe it was the It was a Godzilla store exclusive Hedorah figure because that was the year Godzilla versus Hedorah had turned 50 years old.
Is that Save the Earth?
That is Save the Earth.
Okay. For
The
those of you who
iconic-
don't know or listening out there, we're getting back to the creature double feature. What was it? It was Godzilla versus who?
Hedorah, or the Smog Monster.
The Smog
in the
Monster.
States.
And at the end, they had this really attractive Asian woman singing this song called Save the Earth, Save the... It just resonated and has rent in my head permanently. And when you guys started doing your show, that was the first question I asked. I go, what was that movie? Because I want to hear that song again. And thank God for YouTube, and there it was.
Yeah. And it's funny, the Japanese version of that song is still pretty similar. It has like the same basic melody to it as well.
See, you were a decade too late because you love to collect all this stuff. There was a place in Waltham, Massachusetts called Mr. Big Toyland. Did you ever hear of this place?
It sounds familiar.
Mr. Big Toyland was a toy store, obviously, and it only dealt in exclusively imports from like Japanimation and kaiju stuff. You would have been in heaven at this place.
I would have lost a lot of money.
Oh, a ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
They used to have. Now I don't. You remember a show called Star Blazers? It was a Japanese animated show that came out in Japan in the early 70s. George Lucas stole a lot from this. And basically what it was is these aliens called the Gamlons, which were the Germans, bombing Earth because they wanted to populate, their planet was dying. So they, bombed Earth, and then they sent a spaceship out to space to this other planet that saves the Earth, whatever. Not like the song Save the Earth. But every other commercial was a Mr. Big Toyland. And I frequent this place a lot because I love this animated show. And I remember these Shogun Warriors, these giant, like 2-foot tall robots and Godzillas that were reasonably priced at the time.
At the time.
Now they, what were like $4,000 or something?
I went to a comic store recently, which is where I got that Hyper Gauss figure. They wanted $600 for the box.
Just for the box.
Just for the box.
Not the toy,
Nope.
but the box.
I was like, oh, $600? That's a pretty decent price for a Shogun Warriors Godzilla. No, it's just for the box.
Just for the, not, were you tempted?
I was tempted when I thought it was still the figure.
Okay. Now,
But once I found out it was the box, I'm like, no, I'm all right. I don't need
since
that.
you're the collector and you collect the DVDs?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your holy grail that you want to get your hands on that you haven't ever gotten your hands on before? Collector and then DVD.
I would say probably, it's not even that rare an item, but it's such a gorgeous looking figure. I would love the black and gold Gigabrain line King Ghidorah. The Gigabrain's an expensive line. Like right off the bat, a lot of their stuff is like $400+, and they only do very limited runs of the lines. So I don't even know how much a black and gold Ghidorah would cost nowadays, but I've always adored that figure, and I would love to get it at some point. But they don't go on sale. I don't find them all that often online.
What's the box go for?
Well, those are in bags.
Oh, they're in bags.
They're in bags.
Just Ziploc bags?
They have like not Ziplocs, but they have like header cards. People keep the header cards in boxes.
I grew up in an era when I'm from the Star Wars generation. So when we were kids, we opened all of our toys. We didn't know, but now, do you open them?
Sometimes things. A lot of the times, they don't have boxes. They just have tags. I'll leave the tags on.
Okay, it's like what was the little Furbies? Remember those things from like
Yes.
20 years ago? You had the little tags on them. So that's your main. That's your holy grail. What about you with the DVDs?
Man, I don't know. I kind of have everything.
Really?
I don't know. I was trying to think. Has there been any big things that I've been?
You don't have most of the Ultraman stuff.
Oh, that's true. I don't.
You only have the first 3 series, I think.
Yeah.
Now, you're bringing up Ultraman, Gamera, Godzilla. Is there like a little Avengers of kaijus?
No, because those were all different studios.
Okay.
So Godzilla is owned by Toho, Gamera owned by originally Daiei, now Kadokawa because Daiei folded, and Ultraman owned by Tsuburaya Productions. Tsuburaya Productions was kind of an offshoot of Toho at the time because Eiji Tsuburaya, the special effects director, worked for Toho and then he made his own company. And they would kind of trade, during the productions of Ultraman and Ultra Q, they would kind of trade suits. So there's an episode of Ultraman. I don't know if you remember the title of the episode with Jiris.
Oh yeah. I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
Of it,
So Jiris was this giant frilled lizard like kaiju, and it was They just recycled the suit from the 1965 Godzilla and just put a frill around his neck and gave him a new paint job.
There you go.
So it was, and then in the episode, Ultraman rips the frill off, so it's more or less you're getting Ultraman versus Godzilla.
Right, but without really getting
Exactly.
Ultraman versus Godzilla. Now, do they license each other's intellectual properties to do like projects together?
No, I mean they have something going right now called the Shin Japan Heroes Universe, which is more or less an advertising thing because Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider and the Evangelion films, which is an anime series from a couple years ago, they're all the what's the word I'm looking for? Just the story and the creative team is all under Hideaki Anno. So they're kind of combining all the Shin Japan stuff into one little advertising thing, but it's not really anything.
So what you're basically saying is there isn't a Japanese version of Disney that's going to buy everything.
Not to my knowledge.
Not yet, anyway.
Yet, knock on wood.
Would Disney be interested in something like this?
I hope not.
I wouldn't think so.
I mean, they got the cash.
They definitely have the money. I don't think they would be interested though. It seems kind of out of their wheelhouse almost.
Okay. Now you said
Also,
this
if
is
they want to make a big monster movie, then they've got enough creative people to do it all on
sure.
their. They don't need Godzilla.
Now you guys are part of something called Kaiju United, correct?
Correct.
Now let's be, just dreaming here. You guys hit the Powerball tomorrow. Could you guys start your own kaiju studio and license these things and make your own movies?
Like our own Godzilla movies.
Sure.
That would be a lot of money. Toho is very protective of their intellectual property.
Yeah, they'll sue anyone for looking at it wrong.
Yeah.
So, but basically, they're Disney.
Yes.
More or less, yeah. I mean, I've seen companies like, beer companies that have a Mecha Godzilla, and a off-brand Mecha Godzilla on their cans, and Toho has to be like, no, don't do that. There was a fan film a couple of years ago called Godzilla Heritage that had to get shut down because, I mean, they weren't planning on making any money off of it, but Toho literally said, this looks too good. You can't do it because people will think it's ours.
So basically, they are Disney because I have friends. You know who the 501st New England Garrison are?
Yeah.
These guys who dress up in authentic Star Wars costumes that they make themselves and go around and do charities and whatnot. They put this kibosh on them big time when Disney took over.
Really?
I mean, George Lucas didn't care. He's like, as long as you're not making any money off of it and you're doing it for sick kids and blah 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 blah, go ahead. But Disney's like, no, you have to have written permission. You have to have this, that. You can't appear on TV. You can't appear on local television. You can't even appear on anything video-wise. It's really sad.
That's very depressing.
It is
very
depressing. I mean, you're talking about beloved characters have been around for 50 years. Godzilla's been around for way longer than that.
Almost 70.
Yep.
When did Godzilla... Now, is he the main kaiju? Is he the guy who started it all?
I mean, you can trace it back to King Kong, but technically Godzilla was the first kaiju because that was the first to utilize the tokusatsu filmmaking techniques.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, one of my favorite movies growing up, because it was always on TV, was, I think I talked to you about this, Dave, was a little movie called The Last Dinosaur, which came out in 1977, and it was an American-Japanese production where this guy who's kind of like a Donald Trump, he was a treasure hunter, he's got gazillions of dollars, drills... He has this little burrow machine that went looking for oil, and they end up in the land that time forgot, and the character in it was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and this Donald Trump guy named Maston Thrust.
That's a name.
That could have been a movie that was in Ron Jeremy. Are hunting this thing down, but obviously it was a dude in a rubber suit. Was that a refurbished Godzilla or a cousin of Godzilla?
I believe the last dinosaur, because you said it was a American-Japanese co-production. I believe it was co-produced by Tsuburaya or Toei. If it was Tsuburaya, it may have almost been Gorosaurus refurbished. I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen the film myself.
Okay, you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it was always on Creature Double Feature. Always. I mean, when it was just every other week they seemed to replay this movie. And it wasn't a bad movie. You just had to get by it's a dude in a rubber suit. It was 1977. Not 1957, whenever, first Godzilla came out. That looked real compared to this movie.
Yeah.
All right? I mean, it was just bad. Another thing that we grew up with was a show called Land of the Lost. Have you heard of that?
We've heard of it.
Okay, not the really crappy Will Ferrell movie that came out.
that movie.
Okay, all right. That was like an embarrassment. This show was produced by Sid and Marty Krofft, and it was about a family who were whitewater rafting in Colorado. They went over a waterfall, and they ended up in the land, the land of the lost. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look past the cheap special effects, the stories were written by people who wrote the original Star Trek.
Oh.
And the Twilight Zone. So the stories were actually very good. They talked about death. They talked about, what happens if you break a leg and what. It was like survival because you're in this, foreign land. But people thought it was a kid show. But if you actually sat down and watched it, you'd be like, wait a minute. They're talking about commit suicide because if something happens to their parent and if you get stepped on by a dinosaur, it was just really, it just went over kids' heads. But if you go back and watch it as an adult, you're like, this was really well written. The effects sucked, but it was really well written. So would that be classified as a kaiju?
It would definitely be kaiju adjacent for sure. I mean,
we always stretch the definition to include dinosaurs specifically, and I don't know what else have we. I don't know. I mean, we did a joke episode on all the Disney movies, but that doesn't count.
Nah, it kind of counts. We have a very loose definition of kaiju on the show. It's kind of a running gag at this point. Dinosaurs being the main example, but I would almost consider, because of the amount of effects and the fact that there is a man in a suit, I would almost consider something like Alien. That's pretty Toku.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely consider Land of the Lost.
Okay, here's one. What about Jaws?
That's a good one.
I
Actually.
mean, it was a giant shark that really should. It was like supposedly Megalodon, obviously not as big as the one in the movie The Meg, but it was a monster movie, and there wasn't a guy in a suit though. But it was a fake shark.
It was the big animatronic, yeah.
But would that be considered a kaiju movie?
I don't. At that point, it's just a slightly bigger than normal shark.
I have made the argument that sharks are kind of like dinosaurs because they've been the same.
This is true.
Essentially for like millions of years.
Okay, this is kind of way off the end of the spectrum. But you said a man in the suit. Would an Ewok be a kaiju in Return of the Jedi?
Well, if we're going to go back to the definition of kaiju, the word kaiju just means strange beast.
Okay.
Would you consider an Ewok a strange beast?
Sure, I don't see them walking the streets of Boston anytime soon, or Chewbacca.
Then I guess an Ewok's a kaiju.
Well, there you go. We're here with Dave and Brian. You learn something new every day. They host one of the greatest podcasts on Godzilla, Kaiju, and all his friends, Talking Toku. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
We don't actually have a website, but you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all at Talking Toku.
And how many episodes have you guys done so far?
50?
We'll be releasing 50.
50 episodes.
I believe.
Now, these aren't little 20-minute deals. These are like long-term episodes. You guys really, really, really get into this stuff.
Our longest one is like a little above 2 hours.
Yeah.
Really?
So. It started off relatively short. I think our first couple episodes were around the 45-minute mark, but then it just kind of spiraled down from there.
Now, is this kind of like rehashed conversations you would have as a kid talking about this stuff? Now, as adults, you bring a more interesting perspective to it?
I feel like some of them are.
I mean, the way I always describe it the same way. It's just like a couple dudes like just hanging around, like
chilling,
just talking about like stuff that we normally would. And like the idea is to make it like the audience is kind of there sitting with us, just hanging out. So it's essentially just a conversation we have as friends.
Right.
But,
and what's the response been?
People like it.
Yeah, the few people who have actually reached out to us to say what they think about the show, they've all really enjoyed it. I don't know how many people enjoy it, but the people who do, who I know listen to it, they have really enjoyed it.
And you recently took part in on a big discussion panel in Chicago at a Comic-Con.
I did. I was on a panel. It was the first panel of the weekend at All Monsters Attack. It was Roaring Guitars, and we talked about the influence of kaiju and giant monster films on heavy metal and hard rock music.
Okay, Gwar.
Gwar was, Gwar was the one we mentioned, especially they have a song called Gore Gore, which is just about a giant T-Rex wreaking havoc through a city.
What about Kiss? You think would Kiss kind of be on the fringe there?
I think we did talk about Kiss. I'm not a fan of Kiss personally.
Okay.
But they're like halfway there.
They're halfway.
They're
there.
halfway.
Unbelievable. Now, getting back to the Kaiju United, you guys are part of it. Now, is this a worldwide thing? Is this United States? Give us the 411 on Kaiju United.
Kaiju United, it's not really a location-based thing. It's just, so I am not the head honcho of Kaiju United. That goes to our good pal Jacob Lingle. But his MO, as it were, was just a community of people where it's just very welcoming and, no gatekeeping or what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
I don't know.
the general word of like homophobia, racism, bigotry.
Bigotry.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. So his whole MO is, it's just a community to be welcoming, no gatekeeping, bigotry, any of that, because he was a admin for multiple Facebook groups over the years, and despite those being against the rules in those groups, people were really, really lax on it, and so he's just like, well, screw this, I'm gonna do my own thing, and I'm going to actually crack down on when I see this stuff happening.
Which happens a lot, because I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of the Star Wars movies. Those people would kill their grandmother, to make, George wouldn't want this, and Disney's great, and it was just, it's like a civil war going on in a galaxy far, far away online.
There's a reason I try not to. I love Star Wars, but I try not to interact with.
See, we need to rent Godzilla and just step on some of these people, just get rid of them completely.
I think that's a good call.
Yes.
Now, you just recently moved, Brian, out to the West Coast, correct?
I did.
What, Washington State?
Correct. Yep.
We had this conversation a couple days ago. What's your take on Bigfoot?
Cultural icon, my favorite cryptid.
Is he a kaiju?
He is a kaiju.
Is he?
Yes.
So he's a man in a suit.
Oh, I mean, he is definitely man adjacent.
So have you seen one? Be honest.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I want to.
Now that must be huge out there. There must be like Bigfoot hunters and groups and whatnot that go out like every weekend, like weekend warriors looking for Bigfoot.
Oh, there's Bigfoot, like there's like coffee shops that are like themed around Bigfoot. You have people with like big wooden cutouts of Bigfoot like in their yard. And
that's awesome.
And some like kind of like in the woods out on like hiking trails. So if you're walking around in the dark and you just look over and you'll see like a silhouette.
It's a miracle you haven't seen anybody getting murdered out there, thinking someone running around as a Bigfoot costume just blowing them away.
I mean, everyone there like everyone loves Bigfoot because like everyone's got bumper stickers and everything. So they'll see it, they'll know that it's just. It's Bigfoot. Now
that they know that you're a big time host of this wonderful podcast, Talking Toku out there, have you gotten any new fans out in the Pacific Northwest?
My girlfriend.
Okay, well, there you go. That's a start.
Other than that, no, not really. I mean, maybe one of my coworkers.
You've told me multiple times how you've gone out drinking and like then the Instagram will get a bunch of new followers after you go out, I don't know, to the bar.
That has happened, but that's been when I visited here.
Oh, okay.
We talked about this last week. You should open up a kaiju bar.
We should. There is a kaiju bar in Japan. It's called Kaiju Sakaba. It's an Ultraman themed bar.
We need one here in Boston.
We do. We really do.
I mean, we have that Boston Yeti walking around. You know that guy?
No, I don't.
You don't know the Boston Yeti?
I've never heard of the Boston Yeti.
Google it. It's a guy who dresses up in a Yeti costume and goes out during snowstorms. That dude right there was a perfect walking advertisement if you ever want to do. He needs a Talking Toku sticker or a T-shirt.
He needs something for sure.
You need merch for all these people out there.
We do.
I know. This is fantastic. Like I said, look for it online. Is it on YouTube or wherever you can find your podcast?
Correct.
And the name of the show again is?
Talking Toku.
Now, what's coming up on future episodes of Talking Toku? Do you think you'll ever run out of ideas?
I don't think so.
Probably not.
I think we'll be able to keep scraping the bottom of the barrel for ideas.
I think as long as you and I are friends, we can probably summon the one brain cell to come up with an idea.
Now they seem to be making a lot of new kaiju material. That's one of the big things you talk about on your show. Have you what's the recent newest kaiju thing you watched? Hollywood seemed to got on the kaiju bandwagon. What, around 2014?
2013.
2013?
Pacific Rim was the first one that really kicked it off.
That was like the Shogun warrior robots fighting, and then the guy who directed Rogue One did the Godzilla movie, right?
Correct.
What was his name? Garrett something.
Gareth Edwards.
Garrett Edwards, and that had Walter White in it, and then they had the ones with Eleven from Stranger Things. That was a great scene where they destroyed Boston. I was very happy to see Godzilla destroy Boston.
Yeah, one of the few things we liked about that film.
Yeah, it was cool seeing my home city get trashed.
And the last one was Godzilla versus King Kong.
Versus Kong.
Now, who did you bet on?
What did we bet on? I don't even remember. I think we initially bet on Kong because Kong is...
He's the veteran?
It's not even that he's the veteran. It's that, it's an American production. Kong's the America guy rather than Godzilla, who's from Japan.
He's the America guy.
He's the American guy.
He is the America guy.
He stormed the Empire State Building.
Exactly.
True.
And the World Trade Center.
Oh, where was he? He wasn't when they were on 9/11, was he?
No, not to my knowledge, at least.
All right, well, we can put the blame on King Kong.
Yeah.
Isn't there a sequel in the works?
There is. It's a Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, whatever that means.
What does that mean?
We don't know.
You have no idea?
No idea. They
don't. Wait a minute. They don't consult
They
Kaiju
don't.
United about this stuff?
They really don't. They really should.
They really should.
I think we tend to have pretty good ideas on our show. I think.
I think so too.
Well, honestly, now, which studio put that out?
That would be Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. Now, a lot of other studios, they tap into their fan base to get opinions and story ideas and whatnot. Is that something you guys down the line would love to do?
I think if we were to do it, it would have to be like a subtle changes. We don't want to have too much control, because if we have too much control, that's just going to end badly, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of why King of the Monsters was so bad, because you gave it to a kaiju fan with no oversight.
Because here's how I think about this. Did you watch Andor?
Yes.
So Andor was made by Tony Gilroy, who has gone on record saying he's not a Star Wars fan. And then he ended up making what a lot of people consider to be one of the best things Disney has done with Star Wars.
It's the most adult Star Wars I've ever seen.
Correct. And I think that's what the Godzilla franchise needs. We need less influence from fans to kind of grow the franchise.
Well, if you go back in time and you look at the Star Trek movies, the original one, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, was directed by Robert Wise, and it was a very boring movie. It was basically like an opera in space, just a ship and like reactions. And then Nicholas Meyer, who was not a fan of Star Trek, knew nothing about it, made Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which of course is everybody's Mount Rushmore of Star Trek movies. So you're absolutely right. You need someone who has no idea, because if I do this, I'm going to offend this group here. Oh, this isn't really true. I can't do this. Godzilla didn't have this many scales on his back. Just little nitpicking stuff. You need someone who's going to say, "Fuck it. This is the way I interpret it, and this is what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
Just like they did with Andor. I mean, a lot of Star Wars fans didn't like Andor because they thought it was boring and non-Star Wars. Okay, a TIE fighter showed up a few times. But you know what? It doesn't have to be the same formula over and over and over and over again.
That's why it was so refreshing to me.
I enjoyed it, and I'm waiting for the season 2 of it. So that's what you really want. You want Godzilla from a different point of view. I'm tired of him destroying Tokyo. You want him to do something totally different and have a totally different story. No radiation, no nothing. Just something totally original.
I wouldn't go that far with it. You definitely have to keep some of the main hallmarks of the character intact, because otherwise people will be like, it's not God. That's what happened with the Matthew Broderick film. They went too far away, and that's when the fans.
Oh, by the way, pass that croissant.
No croissants.
Oh, there's no croissants?
Oh,
right.
No croissants.
Damn it.
But yeah, that's why a lot of people didn't react well to that film, is because it was too far removed.
It also had Ferris Bueller against Godzilla.
This is also true.
All right, there was like a Laurel and Hardy movie. But the last thing I want to talk about, fantastic. Plug your sites, plug your podcast once again.
We are Talking Toku. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all at Talking Toku. Spotify is kind of our main outlet for listening, but I've lost track of where else we are.
Here's the most important thing ever in the history of Kaiju, and I want your honest opinions about this.
Lay it on me.
Godzuki?
Hard agree.
Yes.
Hard agree. That is definitely one of the most important things in the last almost 70 years of kaiju history.
And explain who Godzuki is to our listening audience.
I believe canonically he's Godzilla's nephew.
Oh, he's his nephew.
He's his nephew, not his son. He's his nephew in the 1978 Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
Where was Godzuki's parents?
I don't think it was ever explained.
And how do we know it was his nephew? Did he have a birth certificate?
I'm unsure. I think it was just something they line dropped in the show. They was like, yeah, he's Godzilla's nephew.
It's Godzilla's nephew.
Yeah.
And he hung around on a boat.
Yeah, and he could fly.
And he could fly. Could he kind of speak English? I don't remember.
He kind of had some gibberish speak.
Really? Do you think? Now, wasn't there a movie back in the 60s where there was Godzilla's kid?
Yes, there have been multiple Godzilla offspring. Minilla is the one from Son of Godzilla.
Mila Kunis?
Yes.
Okay.
They're the very same.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm a fan then. So that's what I had to get off my chest. Everybody was saying it. They knew I was going to do the show. Ask them about Godzuki. What was your take on Godzuki?
Pretty cool. I had him as a profile picture on.
Did you?
For a while.
Now, do you own that? You own that series on DVD? The Hanna-Barbera Godzilla?
The only season 1's available on DVD. Season 2 never was released on DVD.
Wasn't Mike Pence on there? Wasn't the guy who looked just like him?
I think so, actually. Now that you mention it.
Ridiculous. Unbelievable. I hope your show goes on for another millennia because kaiju doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon.
Absolutely not. There are plenty of people keeping it alive between Toho and mostly Tsuburaya doing.
And you guys.
Us too, Kaiju United, we're all kind of working
And I understand if they follow you on social media, which it is once again.
At Talking Toku on most social media platforms.
And you can see it in the description right here underneath us. If they follow you on social media, they get a free Talking Toku sticker. Is that correct?
Correct. We have a bunch of them. I meant to take them to All Monsters Attack, but I forgot. But yeah, reach out to us. We'll send you some stickers.
Unbelievable. The greatest kaiju collectors, fans in the world are my longtime close personal friends, Dave and Brian from Talking Toku. Let's hear it up for them, ladies and gentlemen.